Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of the Nighttime SCREAMACELICA. As usual, I'm joined by my good mate, Boyce. Boyce, how are you doing?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Buzzing to be here for the second episode, mate. Last week, the numbers were frightening, Kev, so I was really encouraged by that. So hopefully we'll get more of the same pattern this week, mate.
I know a lot of folk must have nothing to do on a Tuesday night apart from watch us two blather rubbish about music, about football and music. Aye, I mean, is the Champions League on the night? Is this or something like that? I don't know again if the Champions League is on or not, because I get fed up with it. As soon as we get popped out in the qualifiers, I didn't bother about it anymore because it loses all its appeal for me. It's been a tough week if you've been a Celtic fan right enough since we've last spoke, but no, it's tough if you're on. It's not a tough week. And the only lads that have actually had worse weeks than us are the royal family and Mumford and Sons. So I'm quite happy about that. and the benches in George Square have had quite a rough weekend as well, eh? So that gives us something else to talk about. But first things first, I think we've got to congratulate one of our great rivals who this week are celebrating something momentous in their history. And so today, Inter Milan are 113 years old. What about that, eh? 113 years unbroken history.
I didn't know where you were going. I knew you were going somewhere. I just couldn't work out where.
Look, we'll always have that night in Lisbon with Inter Milan. So
Brilliant.
Happy birthday, Inter Milan.
But I didn't know that in fairness.
Happy birthday, Inter Milan.
They are great rivals.
Aye, great rivals. And look, we'll always have that day in 1967 with them. So they'll always will be rivals to us. And any time that we play them, I mean, we spoke a couple of weeks ago about the 3H game under Ronnie Dyla as well. So Inter Milan, happy birthday, Inter Milan. Mm-hmm. So. As usual, we're jumping back in the as usual we're jumping back in the Celtic time machine DeLorean, and we're going to go back to the 19th of March 2000. Now, this is just a couple of weeks after. It's just a couple of weeks after last week, but there was something that was said last week that made me go down this rabbit hole. So it was on the 19th of March 2000. 30,000 Celtic fans went to Hampden for the League Cup final, which was the CIS Cup final at that point, and we played Aberdeen. So it was billed as the first trophy of the millennium, and we won this game 2-0. And Celtic actually put out T-shirts with Millennium Cup winners. I've actually got the Celtic view here, I think, with Millennium Cup winners. So for me, this is a strange cup final because it's a cup final that's kind of ignored. I mean, it was a cup final that won Kenny Dalglish, a Celtic legend, a trophy as a manager. But look, it's a bit like setting fireworks off in daylight with what's actually happened since. It's pointless. It's been probably billed as a pointless cup final and what happened the following season when we won the treble under Martin O'Neill. But there's a few strange things that have came out of it. Jonathan Gould got his second League Cup winners' medal, and he also got a third League Cups winners' medal the following season because Rab Douglas never played in goals because Rab Douglas was cup-tied. So Jonathan Gould left Celtic with 3 League Cup winners' medals. Did you ken that?
Wow. I didn't realise it was 3, but it does add up. It does add up.
97 this year and the following year. Tommy Johnson. Now, we were talking off the air there, and you mentioned something about Tommy Johnson. So talk us through the gorgeous redhead Geordie.
I mean, he was a funny character, wasn't he, Tommy Johnson? Because he was always someone who seemed just to be like, I don't know, having a bit of a laugh all the time. But in the space of 12 months, Kev, I mean, he scored 2 big goals. I appreciate what you're saying about the League Cup, and perhaps it became a bit irrelevant when you look at the success that we had the following year under O'Neill. However, I still think that team, that was a good jolt in the arm for them to win that. And it also, if you look at a lot of that team, like we were touching on last week, a lot of them were still the nucleus of O'Neill's team that following season. And winning trophies is always a good thing. You know, it's always a positive, and it's always a good mindset to get into the habit of winning finals. And Tommy Johnson scores in it. And it was only, I think, his 3rd or 4th start of the season. He was as surprised as anyone to start. Then you fast forward 12 months, and of course he scores the winner against St Mirren when we win the league under Martin O'Neill for the first time. And it's Tommy Johnson again. A very similar goal as well, back across the keeper. Although his first touch isn't as bad in the cup final one as what it is in the against St Mirren. But I just thought it was uncanny watching him score 2 really similar goals, both of which, obviously one more important than the other, but both of quite significance considering how little he played. You know, not bad going and scoring a League Cup final winner and a league title winner in the space of 12 months. Almost to the day, I think, as well, the games were. Couldn't have been far off at all.
A lot of people probably forget that Tommy Johnson was still there under Martin O'Neill and he still played a part in that season. I remember when we signed him from Aston Villa, and it was 2.7 million. Somebody will probably correct me about that. And he was a big signing. Was it more?
I think it was 4.
I'll probably disagree, but I think it was 2 point odds. Somebody in the comments will probably check that out. I'm just going to go back. If you know your history, commented there. Where is it? You mentioned Tommy Johnson's touch. The best for touch in Scottish football, Tommy Johnson. That's what, if you know your history says. and I remember his touch for the goal that you're talking about. When we signed him, it was a big signing. He came in just before a semi-final against Falkirk, which would eventually cost Tommy Puns his job. And I'm sure he scored that game. His Celtic career was blighted by injury. He spent a lot of the time. He spent a lot of the time injured. But I remember thinking at the time, I was delighted that we had signed him. It seemed to be a real coup to get a striker of that quality to come from England up to Celtic, and it was one of these players that just didn't work out for it. It just didn't work out, injuries and that. But he's still well liked by the Celtic support. Paul's producer Paul, who's behind the screen somewhere this evening, has interviewed him a few times, and he's a likeable fella. And Neil Lennon wanted to bring him back last season to be part of his coaching staff. So he was a well-liked character, and he scored a goal in a cup final, which makes you part of Celtic folklore, along with Jean-Pierre Doumbé and guys. Jean-Pierre Doumbé. Another guy who scored in this cup final was Vidar Riseth. And Dion Dublin. We'll get to Dion Dublin. Yes. We'll get to the Doob later on. And Holmes under the hammer. Big Dion later on. Vidar Riseth also scored in this game. What was your memories of Vidar Riseth?
I remember he could play about 150 positions. I was never sure what position, that he was his best one. I watched the interview with him after the game when I was doing my homework, Kevin, and he actually says, I was playing a completely new position again today. I was playing further forward, and I was given freedom to try and get in a more forward position. I think he was playing right initially. But my memories of him were he's someone I think he stands out as a memory of that era, though. I don't know why. I think he was red carded against Rangers, wasn't he? So I think there's that. And then it was funny because Paul John Dykes and JP were talking about it the other week. The black shirt with the thin green hoops. And he says, who's the player you think of then? And Riseth is 100% like someone who pops up. I've got no idea why, because he wasn't someone with a sensational goal scoring rate or assist rate, but yeah, he was a utility man. He was probably, you'd associate him with a period that wasn't great for Celtic, but that's about it, mate.
For me, he was never the worst at that time.
No.
As you say, he could do a number of jobs and a number of roles. Whether he done them well enough is debatable. But managers round about that time seemed to go to him to play right back, left back, centre of midfield. And he played. He was a Norwegian international as well. I like Scandinavians playing for Celtic. I think Scandinavians suit the Scottish game. I think they've got the same temperament but better technique than a lot of the Scottish players. And Riseth was maybe just one of those. I'm not going to rewrite Vidar Riseth because, as you say, he was in a horrible period for us. And he did get sent off in that game where we lost the league at Celtic Park. He did. I think did he have a boot at Barry Ferguson or something like that, which is allowed. Of course, that's allowed. That's always allowed to do stuff like that. But he's one of the guys who was a workhorse. And again, when you look back, he wasn't as bad as what we actually thought. A bit like the Norwegian Mike Galloway, I think. If I go back to the early 90s, Mike Galloway could play in a number of positions and had a good 18 months for us, playing centre-half. Martin McNally is his partner. So, he was a competent player. I'm seeing that in the comments. A lot of people saying, not a world beater, but a competent player. And that's what we had. We had a lot of them at that time. The team that day when we beat Aberdeen.
Definitely.
The team was Gould, Maye, Mialbe, Boyd, Jackie Mack, Petrov, Weghorst, Riseth, Lubo, who Alan Stubbs came on for in the 87th minute, Viduka, Tommy Johnson, who Berkovic came on for in the 90th minute. Now, what jumps out at me right away? We're talking about Riseth. I think we need to talk about Big Greenock Morton, Big Weghorst. I loved Weghorst as a player, and I remember being over the moon when we actually signed him from Dundee. Again, he was another one that was plagued with injuries in that time, and another one who probably didn't benefit from a Celtic team being in a constant state of flux at that time. What's your memories of Big Weghorst? Because he actually set up one of the goals in this game. What's your memories of Weghorst? I think there's a delay here. What's your memories of Weghorst, Russell? And it looks like
Russell... you just asked me what my memories of Weghorst was.
Yes,
Sorry, your screen just froze a wee bit there. Sorry, I don't know if it's mind or not. Morton Weghorst, I mean, I remember him at Dundee. He sort of had like the bigger curly hair, didn't he? And then he got it short when he came to Celtic. I remember that. He was someone that never really he didn't seem to ever play 30, 40 games in a season, did he? Tall, sort of gangly, but he had a bit of techers about him. I remember that as well. Because obviously you watch the archive stuff, then there'll always be like the old clip with Weghorst in it. My memory of him at the time growing up wasn't so strong, if I'm being honest with you. I don't remember as much of that, but I would say when you watch the highlights of it, he looked a tidy enough player. But I do remember him at Dundee and he had the sort of curly hair. I can remember that because I think he scored a lot of goals there as well, didn't he?
He did. He was more an attacking midfielder than what he ended up at Celtic. I thought he had ability, but one of the reasons that he probably never made it at Celtic was his injuries. And if you know your history comes into the comments, I'll never forgive Weghorst for not halving Steve McManaman that night on the halfway line. Wim Janssen's year. It was Wim Janssen's year. We drew one each with Liverpool at home, and McManaman runs from the halfway line. And Big Weghorst should have actually horsed him that night into the stand to stop McManaman. I think they tried to force McManaman onto his left-hand side because they thought it was his weak side, and he ended up banging one into the bottom corner.
Kevin, he didn't have a weak side, mate.
There's another one, McManaman. He went to Real Madrid and became a holding midfielder and was the best player in one of the European Cup finals.
I remember he scored the sort of dodgy scissor kick sort of thing, didn't he?
Aye.
He sort of jumped up with both legs and he went. Don't get me wrong, I don't think it was quite the connection he wanted, but it went in the corner. He's got a Champions League winners medal and a goal in the Champions League. And as you said, he played a completely different role for Real Madrid. I mean, you associate him with just being an out-and-out winger, a sort of Ryan Giggs sort of style player. That would be my comparison. I always thought he was like Liverpool's sort of Ryan Giggs type of player, uses his pace, skill, beat players, create goals, and obviously chip in with 10 a season. And then at Real Madrid, he didn't play the same role at all. Spot on with that. He definitely hurt us that night at Celtic Park.
Definitely. We ended up going out. We ended up dominating Liverpool down at Anfield too, and Simon Donnelly missed a sitter. I think he put it over the bar, a one-on-one with the goalkeeper. Kevin Banks in the comments, I'll never forget Riseth being sent off in the league decider when Rangers were passing around him in a wee triangle, so he went right through Reina and got a standing ovation. I remember it now. As soon as I read that comment, I can picture it in my head. He went right through Reina and we gave him a round of applause. That was a horrible night. That. Another thing that I noticed. Yep. So in this team, Eyal Berkovic comes on in the 90th minute for Tommy Johnson. I was at the game that day. I'm sure Kenny Dalglish took off Tommy Johnson just to give him a round of applause and a wee standing ovation because he had scored a goal in a cup final and that was only his fourth start or something like that. So Berkovic comes on in the 90th minute. I don't think he touches the ball. Final whistle goes. All the Celtic players go to celebrate. When the team comes back down for the team photo, Eyal Berkovic is in a sweatshirt and his tracky bottoms. He's not even in the Celtic kit. He's went and got changed.
He got changed. He wasn't interested, was he?
He wasn't interested. It's really weird. If you look at the winning team photo, everybody, Albi and all that are all happy and that. And there's Berkovic standing sulking with a Celtic sweatshirt on and his tracky bottoms back on. He must have been really...
bags of ability though, Kev, didn't he?
He did. He was again. He was one of these other players that I was really excited when we signed because you just saw him at West Ham. He was creative. He could destroy defences. He looked like a typical Celtic player. But again, if you believe the rumours, he was just a wee bit of a bad influence in the dressing room, and he caused a lot of bad blood in that dressing room because of his wages that he was on. And he wasn't shy of letting people know that he was earning more money in them. And
totally. I was going to say, I was thinking of Eyal Berkovic actually this week because obviously when I knew it was the game and you look at the team, you see he was coming on. And at the same time, I just seen on Twitter last week, Trevor Sinclair had posted, I don't know why I follow him, I think he put Hail up once, so I started following him. That's how tragic my life is. But he put up his all-time team 11 or whatever that he played with, and Berkovic is right there in the number 10 role. I thought, fair enough, because Sinclair played with, some top draw players, let's be honest, over the years with England, City, West Ham, but it's Berkovic that he puts in the number 10 role. I thought, aye. I mean, that's compliment, isn't it?
It's one of these guys who you see has got all.
What are you laughing at?
I'm not laughing at anything. All I'm saying is he's just one of these guys who.
You there, Kev?
I'm here. I'm talking away. Is Russell waving at me? I'm talking away here. I'm here. I'm here.
I have no idea what's happening.
I'm all on myself here.
I don't know if it's at my end or not. What's happening here? Kev, are you there?
I'm here. Do you want to log out, Russell, and come back in? If you give me 2 minutes, lads, I'll get Russell to go out and come back in because it looks like it's at his end.
It might be at mine.
See, I'll need to get.
I waited you about 10 minutes ago.
Aye. Russell, if you go back out and come back in, I'll get Paul to put you back in.
Is it me, Jink?
It is you, aye, it is you, definitely you. The comments are agreeing it's me. Oh, he's disappeared now. That's brilliant. Aye, Stuart, I think Jim Orr is actually doing the broadcast tonight. Is doing the technical, the IT for Russell tonight. I think that's what you get when you move to Fife, actually. I'm not 100% sure about that. Some of the comments have been brilliant tonight, lads. So while we're waiting on Russell coming back on, I'll have a look through them. Kinky Cadet, who comments quite often. Berkovic was the poisoned dwarf. Remember when Big John Hartson tried to knock some sense into him? I remember when that's the one thing. Big Hartson says that he made the headlines on the 10 o'clock news after he hit Berkovic. He kicked Berkovic, and he was sitting there watching it, and he had to tell his wife what had happened. And he went through into the kitchen to get a cup of tea, and he came back, and his wife was going, what have you done? You've made the headlines on the 10 o'clock news. So we're just waiting on Russell coming back in. Hopefully he'll be back in soon. Right, he's just been re-invited, so here he comes.
What's happening?
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem.
You were like, it was like at my end, I could still see myself going at a normal pace, but you were all slow and jittery. I thought, this is mad, man. What's happening here? I didn't have a clue what you were saying. Apology.
A couple of the posters were asking, a couple of the commenters were asking if you had dropped an acid, and that's why you couldn't actually hear us. And Kevin Banks actually says Russell's shirt is interfering with the signal. So. Oh, the wonders of technology. It'll be good to do this in the studio once we eventually get done back to the studio.
Oh, definitely.
I'm looking forward to doing this in the studio. Now, that cup final was our first trophy of the millennium. It stopped. It basically gave us a bit of joy over that season. It was really good. But the Celtic view that we took this from, here's the Celtic view here that we based tonight's episode on. I'll need to hang with that at the camera there. Basically says there was a scramble for tickets for the 30,000 tickets. Now, I was going to the games at that point, and still are going to the games when I'm allowed to. And I can't remember a scramble for tickets. We spoke a couple of weeks ago about the game against Bayern Munich. And yes, there was only 20,000 there, eh? And for me, and this could be my memory playing tricks on me, I can't remember a scramble for tickets for that cup final. But the Celtic view says there was even a cartoon on the last page of the Celtic view there. Well, gone on about the Aberdeen support.
It's awfully interesting that you brought that up, because I looked through the attendances for the season, because they're in one of the pages. It's down the left hand side, and I could not believe the crowds we were getting at home. League Cup match 40,000, and then other than that 59,000, 60,000, 59,000. It's in that view somewhere. In the Celtic view, there's a column down the left hand side, and I was pleasantly, because I remember obviously we were saying last week 20,000 against Bayern Munich. What's happening here? What's going on? And then I looked at the actual crowds for that season. I think the game that stood out to me was 7-0 against Aberdeen. And I looked at the crowd, it was like 60,200 or so. Mad. So maybe there was more of a demand than you can remember, because I was pleasantly surprised when I seen the ticket, the amount of people that have been there.
It's one of these things. When I read it, when I was reading the cartoon again, trying to jog my memory, I was going, I can't remember when we got to that cup final thinking we would struggle for a ticket for the final. And maybe because that was the time where if you went to the semi-final, you usually got guaranteed a ticket for the final. And I'm sure the semi-final against Kilmarnock, there was only about 16,000 there, because it was on an absolute horrible night. It was a midweek night. It was cold. One of the worst games of football I've ever actually seen. And there was only about 16,000 there that night. So this could maybe be the days where if you went to the semi-final, you were guaranteed a ticket for the final.
Gotcha.
So maybe it was all those who couldn't be bothered going. Maybe it was all those who couldn't be bothered going to that semi-final against Kilmarnock, who were the ones moaning that they couldn't get a ticket for the final. Look, it was a decent day out. I remember it being a day out. I had the Monday off my work. We won a cup. I mean, what was
The
naughty
rest
like?
is history.
Aye, what was naughty like? I think I had a Monday club on the Monday as well. A few pints in the afternoon. Went to my work on the Tuesday. What's naughty like? We
Love
talked.
it.
We spoke about Vidar Riseth, and on the Friday after this game, what pub on the Gallagate did he end up in with Kenny Dalglish?
Oh, I don't know.
So on the Friday, the following week, if you've read the Celtic View, you'll know the following week we were due to play Rangers at Ibrox. And we were 11 points behind Rangers going into that game.
Mm-hmm.
And Kenny Dalglish was annoyed with the press. He was really annoyed with the press. So him and Vidar Riseth went to Baird's Bar and done a press conference.
That's right. Sorry, I didn't know that.
And it was one of the most strangest, bizarre, and maybe one of the most embarrassing incidents that I think a Celtic manager's ever done, taking a player in the press into Baird's Bar where you've got all the punters sitting there having a pint, and you've got the whole press corps coming into that pub. Now, it was a pub I used to frequent, not going to the games, actually going to the Barrowlands, the concerts. I used to always go into Baird's Bar. I was never in there on a match day. Obviously, coming from Stirling, we used to come in the other end, and I would wouldn't be down the Gallagate. But it was always one of my rituals before going to the Barrowlands. I would always go into Baird's, and it was always good to take your Rangers supporting mates into there as well, because it was a wee education for them, a wee education of culture. The good kind of culture, no their type of culture, the good kind of type of culture that we've got. And I remember I met, well, I didn't meet him, he was sitting next to us. We went to see Doves. Me and my wife went to see Doves at the Barrowlands, and Jimmy for Doves was sitting next to us in Baird's having a pint.
Honestly, that's brilliant.
It was a great pub, and unfortunately it was shut down for, what was it shut down for? Was it the Commonwealth Games 2014?
I can't remember why it was shut, but I knew it was.
I think it was shut in 2014 because the council didn't want all your tourists or your Japanese tourists and that rocking up for the Commonwealth Games and ended up in Baird's and getting sold dodgy microwaves and stuff like that. I think that was the reason that they shut it down. I think that was the reason that its license got revoked. I'm just making that up, but I mean, I think you got offered more than dodgy microwaves in Baird's if you were in there long enough, right enough. That's just the East End of Glasgow for you. I went off on a tangent there, Russell. That cup final, Lubo joined Celtic 18 months before, and he wins his first trophy at the age of 34. What about that, eh? A player of Lubo's quality, having to wait till he's 34 to win his first major trophy. That's unreal, eh?
I think that's the unreal bit. I mean, I think it's a lot older than most players win their first trophy that are, at a level, that they can play for Celtic. But I think when we talk about levels, Lubo's level was, proper high. I mean, he was genuinely, I think, someone that it would have been a joy to have watched him week in, week out at 27, 28. It was a joy to watch him in his 30s with us. But I mean, what a phenomenal footballer. Someone who just put a smile on your face. He was brilliant to watch. He had it all two-footed. And for him to only win his first trophy at 34, it is surprising when you consider his ability. You consider how highly rated he was in France. I know he never played for any of the elite clubs as such, but he was very, very highly rated in France. I'm sure he won French Player of the Year at one point, did he not? You had guys like Zidane saying he was his hero, and then you look at, the Scottish League Cup at 34 is your first trophy. Guy's a genius, man. It just seems a bit surprising, but that's just football sometimes, He's not the only one.
For us that are a bit older than you, Boyce, the fact is that you didn't rate Saint Etienne as one of the coolest French teams ever. It just says a different in the age. Saint Etienne in the 70s, and the early 80s were a fantastic French
Really?
team. They got to the European Cup final in Glasgow in 1977, and
Wow.
they're only French team I think at playing green and white. Some will maybe correct me about that in the comments, but also they were a classic indie band in the 90s called Saint Etienne. So
Of course, yeah, no,
so he played for Saint Etienne, and he was meant to get a move to Marseille, which never went through because Bernard Tapie got done for bribing a referee in Stoughton Rangers getting to a European Cup final, if you like to believe the myth. His move never came, and he ended up. He went to Bastista. Then he went to Duisburg, and we eventually signed him for Duisburg. So that was his first cup. That was his first medal at 34. He then went on to win another League Cup, 2 league titles, and a Scottish Cup. So he got 5 medals, and in the 3 and a bit years he was at Celtic. But what I always remember was Martin O'Neill giving him that game in the Champions League against Juventus, and they ran the show that night when we won 4-3, and they got took off. And they got took off. I can't remember. I can't remember the minute he got took off. But I remember a couple of the Juventus players actually applauding him off the pitch that night.
That's brilliant.
Because they knew that there was this guy was a genius. And as you've already said, Zinedine Zidane, when they asked him who was your favourite player, he went Lubo Moravcik. And for us to actually see him at 34 and to see the ability that he had was frightening. It was, and people wonder what Dr. Joe gave us. Dr. Joe gave us Lubo. I mean, and he made Henrik Larsson the player that we remember, because he moved Henrik for the wing into a centre forward. But to give us Lubo for that period was unbelievable. And I remember Martin O'Neill saying as well that he hadn't heard of Moravcik, and after the first day at training when he turned up and Lubo was there, he phoned John Robertson and went to John Robertson, "I've seen a guy as good as you."
Really? That's brilliant. That's praise indeed as well, eh?
He says, "I've seen a guy as good as you, and I didn't care what fit he kicks with."
That's brilliant. I love that, Kev. That's quality. That is quality. I mean, Venglos wasn't the only one he signed as well, you know what I mean? Obviously, I was telling you before we came on, you know, you look at Viduka as well. There was another Venglos signing, wasn't it? I mean, you know, plucked for Croatia Zagreb, I think they were called at the time, as opposed to Dinamo Zagreb. He was phenomenal. I was looking at the view, obviously, before we came on air and all that, well, through the week, and I'd seen that they'd put up like the season stats for the players, and Mark Viduka's sitting in the league with 23 appearances and 25 goals. I mean, wow, what a record that is. And whilst I knew he was really good that season, I probably underestimated he'd been that effective in the league. Do you know what I mean? I think that kind of took me aback a wee bit. And no wonder, you know, at the end of that season, he got a huge move to Leeds United as well.
I mean, some people like to rewrite history, but Viduka was a fantastic football player, and I remember being disappointed that he was leaving. I probably remember being a bit disappointed that we were signing Chris Sutton to replace him, because Sutton was coming from a really, really poor season at Chelsea.
Yeah.
But Viduka, and you were replacing a guy who had bags and bags of talent. And you could see it. I mean, for a period that season under Barnes, we had Viduka and Larsson up front. That's frightening. When you, for what they went on to achieve, can you actually think of a better double act up front for Celtic? Not what they've done for Celtic, but like raw talent. Can you think of a better strike partnership in the last 20 years?
Well, I think it's definitely up there, because I think Viduka went down to Leeds, who at that point were really seriously about challenging for the title, Champions League, and he walked straight into their starting lineup straight away. For what he'd achieved at Celtic, he obviously didn't win any league titles or anything like that. But as a striker, as I say, that goal record's second to none. Viduka went on and was Middlesbrough's best player at one point, for a couple of years as well. And that was in his 30s. Probably won a hatful of caps. We don't do stats, Kev. We don't know how many. But he certainly was more than English Premier League class. He was a top striker, I think, Viduka. And obviously part of Henrik, what all needs to be said about him. I'm sure we'll dedicate a show to him at some point. But I think there'd be a lot of arguments for Sutton. And the reason for that is Sutton elevated Larsson to a different stratosphere almost in the goal scoring sort of stats, because Larsson, I think, must have got something like 29 goals or something like that, 98, 99, something like that. And then obviously 99, 2000, he's had his injury or whatever, and then 2000 he's on 53 suddenly up to, it's a huge jump. And again, it'd be quite interesting to do your homework on that, find out how many of those goals were assisted by Sutton, if there's a way to find that out. That would be fascinating, because you think of so many times the interlink play that they did, the wee 1-2s, the telepathy that they had. That was the best way to describe it. And for all of Viduka's technique being better than Sutton's, I think Sutton had a better football brain. I think Sutton was very intelligent. I think his awareness on the pitch was excellent. I think the fact he played centre mid, centre back as well in his later days at Celtic never let us down, really.
He did what I would probably agree with. Maybe Sutton done better for Celtic, but I think that was all down to the fact he had a better attitude.
Yeah,
I think Viduka's... Look, with Mark Viduka, he never actually wanted to come to Celtic. There's a whole story about how he was forced to come to Celtic to make agents and that money, and that's how he disappeared right away, because he didn't want to come to Celtic. And for somebody who has a reputation of being half-arsed, what you've actually says about his goal-scoring record was phenomenal. And what I remember about him, like his close control, it's the old cliche, great close control for a big man. The guy was a top-class striker on his day when he wanted to be. And he's another one that you can look at, you go, you maybe should have done better if he had a better attitude, or a perceived better attitude. Again, I don't know the man. We're only speaking for what we've been told and what we've seen with his career as it moved on. I mean, he's a bit like Berkovic. I mean, he went to that Leeds United team. The Leeds United fans love him. I remember I was having a conversation one night with Matt Abbott, who is a spoken word artist, and he's a big, massive Leeds fan. And he was saying that about Mark Viduka. He says Viduka was a hero to him growing up. He says he was the perfect centre forward for them. Barca boy is actually saying Sutton, well, that comment's just moved 2 seconds. Sutton worked on his game and was a pro. Viduka just played. That's an interesting point. I like that one. Viduka just knew he had the natural talent, and that was it.
It's not a bad way to describe it.
That was it. Now, I didn't care what Paul put up as the title for this, but we're going to have a wee bit of a debate here about Stiliyan Petrov. Now, in this Celtic view, and remember, I was at the game. I was at that cup final. Stiliyan Petrov got man of the match, right? And I'm going to show you. I will find it once you start talking. I will find it and I will show you it once you start talking. I remember round about this time, Stan Petrov hitting a bit of form and showing that he was a better player than what he had been in the first 6 months at Celtic Park.
Yeah.
And Graham Spears, I found an interview with Graham Spears when he says it was in vogue to say that Stan Petrov wasn't as bad as we feared. Now, Petrov, for me, was man of the match in this game, and the View sort of backs me up with this. He says he was man of the match in this game. And he was playing well until a thigh injury ruled him out for the rest of the season, a couple of weeks after this game. So he was shown promise as a player round about that time. And a lot of people write him off that season, saying he was absolutely rubbish. That's not the case. He wasn't absolutely rubbish for the whole of that season. He was rubbish when he was trying to tackle Kevin Twaddle playing at left back against Motherwell on a Wednesday night.
Spot on.
But once he actually moved into his position, learned the language, settled in, he showed he was a player. Now, I'm having a look back at Stan Petrov, And Stan Petrov signed in 1999. So we've went into the 21st century. And I'm struggling. I don't think there's been a better midfielder, Celtic midfielder in the 21st century than Stan Petrov. I think Petrov, pound for pound, has been our best midfielder for the last 21 years, even of the ones that are currently playing. The reason that I say this, he was walk-to-walks. He was physical. He was a defensive destroyer. He could play a sitting midfielder role and absolutely break up play. He was creative. He could time a run into the box like a Japanese bullet train to get on the end of those headers. He was a thoroughbred. These football players are called thoroughbreds all the time. He was a thoroughbred, but I reckon he could have done the jumps and the flat, and he could have won both races. I think he's been the ultimate midfielder for us in the last 21 years. There's probably been guys with better talent, but for me, pound for pound, Stan Petrov has been the best Celtic midfielder in the last 21 years.
I think it's a good point. I think it's well made. I think it's definitely up for debate. I think Petrov. I think you're absolutely right. Don't forget how defensive he was initially. Obviously, I don't mean when he was playing out of position, but I remember him playing a sort of more deeper role as well a few times earlier on in his career. And then O'Neill seemed to sort of, once Lennon arrived, it was sort of Lennon, Lambert, and then Petrov just in that further advanced position. Oh, Lubo. And Petrov for me was someone that, as you absolutely say, timed his run into the box brilliantly. He was there's one thing timing yourself in the box, right? But see what you need to be able to do as well is actually finish. I think Petrov's an excellent finisher. I remember the goal in the Scottish Cup final where we're in the dark green strip, Larsson's last game, and even then he seems to have more space or more time, I should say, than anyone. Even though he's got the ball in a tight area in the box, takes his time, picks his spots. He took it like a penalty basically. And he slotted that ball home. Completely calm in a cup final. Brilliant temperament. I can't remember him getting a red card. He might have, but I can't think of any off the top of my head. You'd be hard pushed, Kev. You'd be hard pushed to think of a better Celtic midfielder in the last 20 years. I think there'd be a lot of the new wave would argue Scott Brown. And I totally get. I mean, for me, Scott Brown isn't in the same level as Stiliyan Petrov. I think, Scott Brown, I remember, even under Lennon first time round, was in and out the team at stages. He wasn't actually guaranteed regular. I think because Petrov was there for 5-6 years as well, gives him it's a real sustained period to be at the club. So when you think about that kind of adds weight to the argument. Whereas that has to be, when you think of ability-wise, like a vote for, a Wanyama or something like that, because to me, he was a destroyer in the midfield. Bags of ability, could hit it from 30 yards, broke up play, could find a pass, long range, short range, the lot. I thought he was a huge influence in the team, but wasn't there really as long as a Petrov, and that would probably count against him in the argument. But I certainly think in the discussion, you would get the likes of Brown for his longevity and his influence in the team, if not ability. I think Wanyama would definitely be in there just on the ability side, but not just a long enough period at Celtic. And then I think Petrov's he's the perfect all-rounder, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm. He was a perfect all-rounder, and I'm going to take on board what he says about Wanyama. Wanyama wasn't as creative as Petrov.
No.
Wanyama wasn't as creative as Petrov. It was the power that he done things. It was his physicality that he done things, and he had those nimble feet as well. I mean, I'm trying to think back here of midfielders that I've really loved since Petrov's left. And Joe Ledley. Loved Joe Ledley, but Ledley couldn't do what Petrov could do. No. Ledley was an elegant footballer, but he had a role in the team, and he couldn't do a full midfielder's role. He couldn't do the sitting role. Ledley was another one that could time his run into the box, had a good strike rate, was creative, but he couldn't do the destroyer role. He couldn't do what Petrov could do. Wanyama, I spoke about Wanyama again. I think he was a different type of midfielder who wasn't as creative. And when I think back about it, I think pound for pound, Petrov's been the best. Callum McGregor is a coach's dream, and I've said that plenty of times, but he couldn't do what Petrov does. He couldn't do the role. He hasn't got the physicality to do the modern role that what Petrov done at that time. And for me, he's probably been the best midfielder. He is the best midfielder I've seen in the last 21 years for Celtic. And I would maybe make an argument now, if I was doing a greatest Celtic 11, he would probably get a greatest Celtic 11 in the midfield.
Wow, that's big. There you go.
That's me. When I started thinking about it, I'm going, I don't think I've seen a midfield player as good as him in the modern era at Celtic.
That's fair. That's totally fair. I get that. I mean, again, it was one of those things. Petrov was you always think of the O'Neill era with Petrov, and he was the sort of the younger, fresher one in the midfield, and the experienced heads of Lambert and Lennon, and he was the one who brought real energy to that midfield. Like you say, big goal scorer, timed his runs well, had a bit of dig about him. He used to win a lot of free kicks as well. I always remember he used to win a lot of free kicks and penalties as well, Petrov.
Mm-hmm.
He was a good player, really, really good player.
Well, there were certain elements of the Scottish press called him a diver. I just call that intelligent play and buying free kicks because players couldn't handle them.
Oh,
he scored, and he was a big game player as well. He scored goals in that Seville run. He always liked a goal against Rangers as well, especially at Ibrox. He liked a header. For me, look, the way that he left under a cloud. He signed a new contract and went in the huff and decided he wanted to leave under Gordon Strachan. But it was probably time for him to move on, and you see what he achieved down in England as well. The Aston Villa fans love him as well. So it shows you that he was a highly decent player, highly decorated with Bulgaria as well. And I'm going to pin that colours on my mast. He was, for me, he's been the best pound-per-pound midfielder in the last 21 years. I don't think there's any argument in that. Now, David Kelly, Armstrong, he had a brilliant 6 months, but was awful for the rest of the time here. What I would say about Stuart Armstrong is the only one I've seen be creative physically as what Petrov was. Armstrong used his strength quite a lot of time to actually create chances. He was just a powerful player, but he still wasn't in the same class as Petrov for me. He still couldn't do it. He still wasn't the all-rounder of Petrov, and I still think Petrov was far more physical.
I think the one thing I would give Armstrong is, though, he's went down to England and kind of played the same role. Obviously, it maybe took him a wee bit of time to get in the team, but Petrov wasn't as effective playing further forward for Villa, because I remember he got pelters when he first went to Villa, very short spell, and he got sort of converted back into the holding role that obviously we were talking about earlier. Stuart Armstrong, what I would give him credit for, has managed to bag goals in the Premier League on a consistent basis, and in that league it is very difficult to adapt from the Scottish League to English League, as we all know. And I think he must have been pushing 10 goals again this season, probably the last couple of seasons pushing 10 goals, and I don't think that's a bad contribution for someone who probably doesn't start every single game, you know what I mean? I respect Armstrong for going down there and doing the same thing down there as what he did for us.
Stuart Armstrong is the player Ryan Christie thinks he's going to be. That's just me. That's just me making a complete rash comment. And I still haven't really forgiven Stuart Armstrong for no humping that ball out the park against England, rather than trying to play that pass. Now, I spoke earlier about Celtic doing bizarre, memorabilia for winning that cup, a T-shirt with Millennium Cup winners and all of that on it. In this Celtic view, I'm going to put it up to the camera, which is not going to be very good for you that are listening on the podcast. But I'm going to put it up on the camera. And in this view, you've got a Henrik Larsson tankard, right?
Yes.
Which was a charity tankard, which was raising money for the Tommy Burns charity at that time. Now, I'm going to put this on Twitter. I wonder, has anybody out there got one of these tankards?
Yeah, good question.
I want to see if somebody's got one of these tankards and what it's actually worth now. Because I hate to say it, it looks a bit naff. judging by the pictures.
Aye.
Judging by the pictures, but the pictures can actually be wrong. I mean, a lot of folk think I'm beautiful judging by my pictures, and that's completely wrong. So I'm going to put this on Twitter, and if anybody in the comments has a look at this, the Henrik Larsson tankard, do you know anybody that's got one of these sitting in the living room in their display cabinet or sitting on their mantelpiece? So I'll actually stick a picture of that up on Twitter as well.
Brilliant.
To see if anybody's got one, and see if we can get it in the ACSOM studio. The Henrik Larsson tankard. Right, we're now 50 minutes in again, Russell, and we haven't spoken about music yet.
We've done it again.
They've done it again. Producer Paul's going to be cursing us again.
Oh, I know.
That we're keeping them behind, stopping them going home. Let's have a wee look. Music. So on the 19th of March 2000, Jerry Halliwell was number one with Bag It Up, right? Oh, there's producer Paul coming in there. I'm always watching. So Jerry Halliwell was number one with Bag It Up. If we need to clear something up here, Russell, we really need to clear something up. Something that the viewers and the listeners really want to know. Who was your favourite Spice Girl?
Jerry Halliwell.
Was it even though she wore a Union Jack dress?
It was one of those things. I just like the red hair. Eh? She had it, man. She looked like she'd be the most fun. So that was it, man. Not gonna lie to you.
I mean, I think they're going to need to have an intervention. She wore a Union Jack dress, and she was still your favourite Spice Girl.
It'd look all right in the bedroom floor, though, Kev. You know what I mean?
Oh, when it was International Women's Day yesterday, mate. Come on, we can't be saying things like that. We'll get taken off there. We'll get taken off there, man. You can't say things like that. Mine was always Sporty Spice because it looked like she wouldn't waste a hamburger supper. All the rest of them looked like they would. And that was the only reason I like Sporty Spice. She looked like it was the only one that was... and Mel B as well, Bo Selector, that just rules that out completely.
That
rules that out completely. Number one was still Travis with The Man Who. So that album was still number one at that time. I'm not going to go back over that because I'm going to go back over that later on. I think we're going to talk about. We had a wee bit of a technical issue earlier on the day, so Russell hasn't picked a single. So I'm going to fire two singles at Russell to see what he thinks of them, see his reaction. Blink 182, All the Small Things, which was number 2 in the charts at that time. What's your take on American skateboard punk?
See, to be honest with you, I think there is a place for it. It's not something I would put on. But if it came on the radio, I'd kind of go, mind that, and I'd probably turn it a wee notch up and just sort of tap my foot along to it. I remember All the Small Things, but I kind of find it like comedy music. Do you know what I mean? So it's not really. There's no harm in it. It's all good. I think I don't think a very distinctive voice as well. The videos are really funny.
When you say comedy music there, that's what I was thinking. The videos were always a bit quirky, and they were a bit as Stuart Orange actually said American Pie. They were a bit American Pie. What was the other one? It wasn't Blink 182. Who done Pretty Fly for a White Guy?
Offspring.
The Offspring. And like that video when they had the guy with the fake tattoos and all of that as well. What was the other one? The Bloodhound Gang.
41.
Some 41, the Bloodhound Gang.
Bloodhound Gang, yeah.
There seemed to be a load of bands appeared around about that time who were off of the sort of American punk skateboard scene. It wasn't something that I was really into. But when I hear All the Small Things, I go, that's quite a catchy song, that. But again, it reminds you of the videos. It reminds you of other things. It doesn't really remind you of the band. At number 7 in the charts was All Saints with Pure Shores. Now,
tune.
It is a tune, eh?
That is a good tune.
Now, William Orbit was everywhere at that point. He had produced Madonna's album at that point as well, and he had an album out himself at that point. So that song by All Saints was theme tune of The Beach with Danny Boyle.
Right.
With Danny Boyle.
Right.
With Leonardo DiCaprio, and that's why Trainspotting 2 took so long to get made, because Ewan McGregor fell out with Danny Boyle because Leonardo DiCaprio got that role in The Beach, and it was promised to Ewan McGregor.
Okay, good knowledge. I like that.
Aye, so that's why they never spoke for 20 years because of that.
Wow.
I've only ever seen The Beach twice, I think, and I know it was filmed in Thailand, and The Beach, it was filmed in Thailand, is now closed for tourists because of wear and tear on the beach, because obviously the film made it massive and everybody went there, and basically to preserve the reef and the status of the beach, it's now shut for tourists. It'll be shut for tourists anyway, because we're not allowed to go anywhere. We're not even allowed to go and visit somebody in Clackmannan. Not that you want to go and visit somebody in Clackmannan, but if you've got family there, sorry about that. But that was shut. What's your favourite Danny Boyle film?
I would say I probably prefer The Beach to Trainspotting. In terms of my favourite Danny Boyle film, I don't really know. I think The Beach are probably better Trainspotting. Wow. I think Trainspotting's underwhelming at times when I put it on. Like, there's moments in it of gold, and then I don't know. I think as a whole film, it's cool to like it, as opposed to it's actually that brilliant. If I'm being completely honest, I would watch it. Don't get me wrong. I would laugh at loads of bits, but I think it's a bit overrated. I would watch The Beach ahead of that any day.
Oh, I think that's a controversial hot take, boys. Quite controversial hot take. I like Trainspotting. I've spoken about that plenty of times. I also like 28 Days Later by Danny Boyle as well. Have you not seen 28 Days Later? No,
but not.
Well, once we've finished on this, that's a film that you should go and watch.
Right, okay.
I would recommend. Right, we may as well get into the two albums that we've picked that we've picked for this week. So, Russell, what's your album for this week? Which came out in March 2000.
I Stand on the Shoulders of Giants. It's a safe bet, Oasis album. But it sort of marked the second coming of Oasis, if you like, because it was obviously the first sort of period where they brought in Andy Bell and Archer. Couple of insights from it. I think it's funny that Noel Gallagher's ego was clearly getting crazy big. I think he'd sort of sacked off a couple of members before that album, Quigsy and Bonehead. And then, he plays the bass on Go Let It Out, the lead single. And this just be interesting things I noticed with music, Kev, right? It might not be a big deal to most, but he has to introduce that he's coming in with his bass during the song. So the song started with the acoustic guitar, and then pick up the bass, and I'm like, what? We get it. You're playing bass on this, no? I mean, I think to me that was maybe the start of his ego just getting a wee bit out of control. He's not a naturally cool person. I don't think Noel Gallagher. I think he tries to be cool. He always used to look in the 90s like he was wearing someone else's clothes. He was always in these baggy shirts, and like he looked like he'd been shopping at a jumble sale. I think stuff like that shows that's like a wee man syndrome, that, having to say, oh, pick up the bass, like there's me picking up the bass. It's like, that's you still always trying to get like the wee tuppence worth in, you know what I mean? But the album itself, I mean, the opening tracks, obviously what they walked out to for years, after an instrumental called Effing in the Bushes, and what's a tune? As soon as I played the album today, as soon as that starts, it just smashes you in the face. It's a really good song. It gets you going. Other than that, it's definitely the first signs that Oasis were going a different direction for the next sort of 9 years. Who Feels Love, I do like as a song. but I don't think there's any two ways about it that it's completely different sounding from what they normally did. It's probably a bit too Beatlesy. But there's a couple of good tracks. I like I Can See a Liar. I think that's rock and roll. I liked Sunday Morning Call as a single. I didn't think that was bad at all. Where Did It All Go Wrong was a bit samey. But I still think, in terms of albums, whilst it's probably Oasis's purest, or my least... let me not say that. Let me say it's my least listened to Oasis album. I still think, as I do with all those albums, they've got a minimum of 4 or 5 tracks on there that you can go, "Aye, that's good, that's good," and that's a key to a good band. And they did look particularly cool then.
Barca Boys came into the comments and says everybody looked like that in the 90s, and I think if you look at pictures of me in the 90s, I think it was really, really baggy. The fact is, I've still got football tops for the 90s that still fit me, so there must have been like absolute tents on me. Like,
I mean, I don't think that's not
them, I don't like my baggy clothes now, but that's because I've got a dad punch. So the slim fit shirts that you fit yourself into didn't look good on me anymore. There was another comment back there. I can't remember who done it. Aye, Danny Boyle's direction at the Olympics was absolutely fantastic as well. The opening ceremony of the Olympics was brilliant as well. The music that he chose that night was to open it with F buttons was just unbelievable. That album, I listened to that album again today, and it was better on my re-listen than what I expected it to be. There were some things jumped out at me. I'm always going to say Go Let It Out as a classic Oasis song. It's up there with some of the best stuff. But for me, it's got that beta band vibe as well with the guitar at the start. Then he's got that rolling bass, as you say. Who Feels Love, just a Beatles pastiche to George Harrison for me. I didn't like Put Your Money Where Your Mouth Is. Little James is absolutely terrible. Even though it like ends well, it's got a nice big ending. But the lyrics, do you play with plasticine? Do you jump on a trampoline? Jesus Christ, Liam! Just the producer must have walked out the studio that day and let them do what they want and came back and go, "Who's recorded this rubbish?"
It's terrible. It's terrible.
Gas Panic, decent song.
Oh yeah. I meant to say that. Gas Panic's a tune.
Where Did It All Go Round sounds too much like a Paul Weller tune for me.
I get that.
Paul Weller could have actually had royalty rights on that, but I can't remember what Paul Weller song it actually sounds like. But when I heard it today, I'm going, that sounds like a Paul Weller solo song. But I couldn't.
They were very pally at that stage as well. It probably was.
I agree with you regarding Sunday Morning. I think that's a classic Oasis song as well. Up there with Go Let It Out. Didn't buy I Can See a Liar. That's just, for me, that's just a bit Oasis by numbers. I can you says that you really loved it, but for me, it's just a bit. I think it sounds it sounds a bit throwaway to me. And the final song, Roll It Over. Massive Pink Floyd vibes on that. Great gig in the sky with the orchestra on that, which is very similar to the song that they Soldier On that they done later on Dig Out Your Soul. So again, it's one of the albums. When I went back to it, I went, there's probably more good stuff on that than what I actually remember.
I pleasantly enjoyed it. And as I say, it's my least listened to sort of Oasis album, if you like. But I was pleasantly surprised when I listened to it today, Kev. I was like, my foot was tapping, man. I was quite happy. I wasn't quite swaggering down the street, but I was enjoying it, mate. I was enjoying it.
You weren't swaggering like Jagger. No, that time. I went to see them at Murrayfield round about that tour. They played at Murrayfield with Doves and the Happy Mondays supporting them. And it was a fantastic day. I really loved Doves. I really, really loved Doves. And to see the Happy Mondays at that time as well, just absolutely slaying 50,000 folk. I remember when they started doing Rope for Luck, the whole place went mental, and it was a really fair play to Oasis. They put a decent bill together that night. That tour was recorded for Familiar to Millions, the Wembley shows, when Liam's absolutely bluttered, swearing all the time all the way through that album. I don't think no likes that because of Liam's behaviour on that live album. But hey ho, that's what you get when you've probably got the greatest rock and roll frontman since John Lydon, for me anyway.
Definitely.
And Brown, I still stick Ian Brown in there, even though he's become a tinfoil hat wearing bizarrist. But I still stick Ian Brown. If you didn't have Ian Brown, you wouldn't have had Liam. Now, for me, that's it. The album I picked is Embrace, Drawn from Memory. Right? That was released that month as well. On this week, the song You're Not Alone was in the charts. And this is a kind of album that I'd written off. I had written off by Embrace. I think it's mainly because it's got a shite cover. It's got a horrible cover. Whoever signed off that cover should have been shot. And I'll go with Zinco here. Exterminator with the Primal Scream was released in 2000 as well. My favourite album of that year, mate, but I just can't keep on talking about the Primal Scream because folk will just get bored. And yes, but that was my favourite album that year. But Embrace, Drawn from Memory. The first 3 songs on that are utter classics. Utter classics. The Love It Takes, You're Not Alone, and Save Me. Then you've got Drawn from Memory. Then you've got the Bunker song, which is sort of based on Effing in the Bushes with Oasis when you actually listen to it. Then you've got New Adam, New Eve, Hooligan. It's a great album, an absolutely brilliant album. And so what I done was, I had a look at the other albums that year that were getting big write-ups. And I'm going to call it post-Britpop, right? Because a whole load of these bands exploded post-Britpop, and I include the Stereophonics, Travis in that as well, right? This album's far better than The Man Who by Travis. Far better than The Man Who. Their first album, The Good Will Out, is far better than The Man Who. This album's better than Performance and Cocktails that we spoke about last week. For me, it is far, far better than that album. But it never made any of the lists. I mean, if you have a look at the Parachutes was released that year as well. And Parachutes by Coldplay ended up in the top 5 of the end of year lists with all these journalists who vote for it. And I'm going, no, Drawn from Memory is a better album than Parachutes. Dove's Lost Souls came out that year as well. I'd put they two on the par because I love Lost Souls.
Doves are good.
So it then got me thinking about Embrace's body of work. And you're talking about they've got 7 albums now. Yeah. And their last album last year, Love Is a Basic Need, was a fantastic album as well. Up there with some of their best stuff. Up there with some of peak Embrace. And I'm going, why has this band never got the recognition that they should have done? I remember you would have been kicking about Stirling at this time. They played the Albert Hall in Stirling. Right. Round about, I think that would have been out of nothing.
2008, something like that, 2005?
I think Gravity came out.
Yeah, 2005, something like that, 2006.
And this gets me to my hot take about Embrace. The reason that they've never got the kudos that they've actually deserved was because of Gravity, because that was written by Chris Martin.
That's written by Chris Martin, I knew that.
And people have seen them as they were just jumping on Coldplay's bandwagon at that point. And I completely disagree with that. I think if you look at Embrace's back catalogue, they should be up there as one of the bands, one of the early 2000 bands that should be. They should still be they still do sell out venues, but they should still have a greater status than what they've actually got. They've just been written off, and I reckon they've been written off because of the fact that they were for Yorkshire, and they weren't really very cool. And the singer, he wasn't the best singer, truthfully, but he done. But the songs, him and his brother Richard McNamara songs were absolutely fantastic, and I would recommend anybody to go back and listen to Drawn from Memory and any of the back catalogue. And also, I think what let them do as well, they wrote the England World Cup song for the 2006 World Cup.
That's right.
I think that let them down. I think that let them down badly as well. Just being involved in, but not in the football stuff, because if you want to talk about great football songs, I love World in Motion. I think World in Motion is a fantastic,
brilliant tune.
A fantastic football song, probably one of the best football songs ever. And if you're actually being honest with yourself, Three Lions is a bit of an earworm, isn't it?
It's a tune, mate. It doesn't matter what anyone says. It is a tune. It's a classic, catchy pop track that's just unfortunate about English football team, but it's brilliant.
It is, and even though it's a great song, and all these folk go, I hate that song, but it's like, it's got that worm it gets in. Ian Brodie for the Lightning Seeds, who I know can write decent songs.
Definitely, I agree.
And so for me, that's one, and I think it summed up that time of the 90s with Badil and Skinner, fantasy football. I think they got, I think, apart from World in Motion and Three Lions is spot on for a football song. I don't think Three Lions can be topped as a football song that done its job, what it was meant to do, what was meant to be sung, and
it transferred to the terraces, unlike any of the other ones. That's the difference. It transferred to the terraces perfectly. You know what I mean? And
it's still sung today, and the Germans have got their own versions,
really?
As well. Aye, they sang "Football's Coming Home." When did they have the World Cup? When they had the
2006.
Aye, they sang a "Football's Coming Home."
Wow, I didn't know that.
They rearranged it. That's quite weird. You notice the two bands that they picked, both had brothers in them.
Oh, very true. Very true.
Brothers in them. Brothers that played football. Who's the first brothers that come to mind when you're talking about brothers that played football?
Ooh, can I say the De Boers, mate? The Nevilles.
The Nevilles. McStays. Willie and Paul.
Of course. To a point. Aye.
Now that you mentioned the De Boers, I'm reading the book Brilliant Orange by David Winner. And he talks about, somebody's mentioning Euro 96 in there and says Noel Gallagher refused to write the England tune for Euro 96. I think he also refused to do the 98 one as well, which was done by the Spice Girls and Ocean Colour Scene.
Ocean Colour Scene.
Aye, I think done the 98 one as well. The De Boer brothers. So in 96, there's a famous picture of the Dutch camps split into two in a hotel in Liverpool, and you've got all the Surinese black players on one table and all the white Dutch players on another table. So there was racial tension in the Dutch squad that year.
Wow.
So the following year,
did
you not know that? No, there was there's been books written on it, and it represented what was happening in Holland at the time. There was racial tension in Holland at the time, and a lot of the black players like Seedorf and Davids and all of that were big stars, and a lot of the white Dutch didn't like it. So after Euro 96, the Dutch went to qualify for the World Cup, and they played in Turkey. And this is on YouTube. If nobody believes me, this is on YouTube. And the Dutch went to Turkey and got a penalty kick, and Clarence Seedorf got the ball for the penalty and put it on the spot. And the two De Boer brothers turn round and do not watch, because it was Seedorf that was taking the penalty.
No way.
Not like I do. Sometimes when it's a penalty kick and it's a big game, I go hide behind the couch or turn round and go, no, I can't watch this. They turned round to make a political statement.
Wow.
That is true. And they have admitted it. That was because Seedorf were taking that penalty kick. So
pathetic that is, you know that. I hate stuff like that.
I know, when I read it, I was going, well, remember the song the Celtic fans used to sing, one called Ronald, one's called Frank, one's missed a penalty, the other one is what that guy was doing outside Ibrox. Right, I think that's another 1 hour 14-minute show, Russell.
Brilliant, mate. Loved it.
Good job Paul's no paying us been a minute. Or we would be here all night.
Speak for yourself, Kev.
I'll need to get my contract reviewed, I think. Thanks to everybody who's joined in tonight, and also for putting up with us when we had that wee slight technical difficulties with.
Apologies, that's my fault.
For Russell trying to jump on Jim Orr's dial-up broadband, but I think me and you are back on Monday. The Monday comes back on Monday, and the evening Tuesday comes back next Tuesday, and I haven't got a clue what we're going to be talking about next Tuesday. So,
plenty of time, mate. Plenty of time.
If you've got any ideas, fire them in. If anybody's got any ideas what you want us to talk about on a Tuesday night, any albums that you want us to have a look at or listen to, send them into on Twitter. What's your Twitter handle, Russell?
At RussellBoyce1.
And mine's is at a Northern Pros. So just contact us on Twitter or leave a comment underneath this video and hit like as well. Or leave a comment underneath this video and we'll have a look at it and we'll see if we can get them done, because it might be a bit boring just having me and Russell picking what games you want us to look at, and we didn't know everything, so there might be something else that you want us to go down rabbit holes with. So lads, boys, have a nice evening. Everybody else, see you later.
Thanks,